Hi, my name is Carole Webb Moore-Slater, and I teach how to write a memoir here at the Spring Hill Library. And the reason I teach this important subject is because I believe every one of us has a good story to tell and needs to be written. And I believe that every one of us can actually write a good story. There are a couple of, I guess, personality traits that are necessary. It's not that you have to be extremely talented New York Times writer, journalist, but the four things that you must possess are persistence, determination, enthusiasm, and a passion to do that. And if you feel that way about your story, you can write a memoir. And in the classes that I teach here at Spring Hill Library over a 4-week period, I will guarantee that you can write a memoir essay during that time that you'll be, I think, happy with, if you choose to write that essay. So what is a memoir? A memoir is like a snapshot moment. It's not a story about your whole life. That's an autobiography. A memoir is just a moment in time, a significant, maybe where a significant event happened in your life, and it impacted you in a way that you recall and remember. Why do I teach memoir writing? And that's a very good question. I never meant to be a writer. I never planned to write a book. I always kept journals of my kids growing up or things that happened, but that was just to help me remember what happened. I didn't do it because I wanted to share it with anyone else outside the family or in any other way. But 1 year later on in life, I was in my 50s, a significant event happened to me that I had to write about. Passion took over, determination took over. It took me a long time to do it, but I'm glad that I did. I want to tell you my story so maybe you'll understand. I actually wrote a book, a memoir, based on my father, Dana Webb. Since that book, I've written articles, memoirs, short stories, all nonfiction in different publications. And that's what I kind of promote. The book was something I had to do, and it took me quite a long time to do it. This is my story. In 1955, when I was 7 years old and my brothers were 5 years old, my father was killed in a plane crash. He was flying for the Ohio Air National Guard, and it changed our life dramatically. My mother was only 30 years old. She moved us across several states back to her hometown of Nashville, and we started a life all over again. But she never let the memory die of our father. We always knew he was the love of her life. You could tell when she talked about him because her eyes sparkled. She had a huge smile on her face. There was never anyone else that matched up to him. So that's how we remembered him. We remembered him through those stories that she told, through stories that my grandmother told. We saw pictures of him, but my brothers and I, we didn't really remember much about him because we were so young. When my mother was 60 years old, way too young, she died unexpectedly of a heart attack. And although devastated, in cleaning out her house, I claimed this old cedar chest, not an attractive piece of furniture. It was bulky, it was heavy, it was beat up, but somehow I knew that it was part of my, future and maybe part of my past. I had to have it. I didn't remember anything about it, except that it was always in the house. It was always in a closet. It wasn't out where anybody could see it, but it was in a bedroom closet, or it might be in the garage. It was kind of hidden, but it was always there. So I claimed it and did not open it for several years. I just couldn't. When I finally got up the courage to look in this cedar chest to see what was actually in it, and I assumed it'd be blankets, you know, with holes in them, or wool coats. I had really no idea. And when I opened that rickety chest, I found a treasure that was priceless. It turned out that it was my mother's hope chest. And at the bottom, under all the layers of memorabilia that she had collected as a, you know, when she was younger, before she got married and while she was married to my father, there were 3 cardboard boxes tied with string. Well, actually it wasn't string, it was ribbon. And I pulled the boxes out, and they were filled with letters that my father had written to her during World War II. And I was just so excited to find something that I could do or look at or read or contribute to our family. My brothers were fighter pilots. They went on and joined the Air Force, and they flew fighter planes just like our father did in World War II. But I didn't really have anything, but now I had the letters. So I pulled them out and put them in chronological order and started reading them, and the letters told a story. It told a story about a 19-year-old who left college to join the Army Air Corps, who wrote to his parents quite regularly, several times a week, to tell them about what all he was doing and going through, and I found his voice. I started reading the letters and got to know him, got to know my father. My brothers knew a little bit about it, but I wanted to surprise them. It took me over a year, but I compiled all the letters, transcribed them all, and gave them to my brothers for a Christmas present. And they were so excited and thrilled, but that wasn't the end of it for me. They came back, they shared it with their friends, they came back, and within a few months were saying, "Carole, sorry, you're going to have to write a book. You know, taking this to FedEx, having them print it out and bind it with a little coil binding, it's not going to work. You're going to have to write a book." And so I spent about the next year doing historical research and putting together history, combining history. I've got an education background, so I wanted this book to not only be a love story or a story about family, but I also wanted it to be a historical reference about World War II. The letters were amazing. They started when he joined, which was pretty amazing. So the first letters for the first year were just to his parents. Then he met my mother in one of the letters, and that was really fun to read about, because on the first date he had written to his parents. He wrote to them and said he was going to marry her. 6 weeks later he was transferred, and that should have been the end of that relationship. Remember, it was back in 1943. There were phones, but he'd have to wait in a long line on base to talk to her on the phone, and that's not personal. There was no texting, there were no emails, there was no Skype, there was no visiting on the weekends, because he was now in Florida, and it was 18-hour train ride from Nashville to Florida at that time. Plus, she was 19 and single. Her mama wasn't going to let her go to Florida to see, an Army dude or Air Force dude that she just met and spend the weekend. It wasn't going to happen. So his only choice was to get to know her and for him to get to know him through letters. And a year and a half later, they eloped, right before he was going to be leave for Europe. So the letters were the love story. They were about the flight training. He got the plane that he wanted, the best fighter plane in World War II, the P-51, and he flew against Nazis in Germany. So that was my story. It took me quite a long time to write it. I self-published it, and I had a marketing plan of my own, and I started doing presentations. Meanwhile, this all happened when I turned 65. This did not happen when I was a young person. I was 65 and retiring from Vanderbilt after 40 years in the disability field. So I completely took a right turn and started doing some new things. And one was presentations in the community. And then someone talked me into doing a how do you write a memoir class, because the people I would talk to along the way would say, yeah, that's wonderful. I want to write a memoir, but I have no idea how to get started. Or I get started and my memories, I get lost in the weeds and I can't finish. And so I did a lot of research and put together a class. 4-week sessions, 4 or 5 week sessions that teaches people how to write a memoir if that's what they want to do, how to tell their stories if that's what they want to do. And I do it in steps and with specific instructions. For example, I'm going to get you all started today. If you want to write a memoir, step 1. Now remember, a memoir is a true story. And some of you probably know exactly what you want to write about. That you remember an event or something that happened in your life that impacted you in a way that changed your life dramatically. So you know what you want to write, and that's great. There are others of you that will go, gosh, I have so many memories, I'm not exactly sure what to do. Either way, try this exercise. Get yourself a notebook and a pen and a timer, or your watch or your phone. Give yourself 10 minutes and let it go and let it flow. Let the writing flow. And try to list events that impacted your life in a major way. That just come to the top of your mind. And write them down. And in that 10 minutes, I'm hoping that you have at least 10, maybe even more. That's step 1, is identifying, is just jotting down some memories. Step 2 is looking over your list. Looking over your list and thinking, how many, what are the details? What do I remember about that event? That event that happened. Who was there? What time of the year? What details do you remember? What did you feel about it? What was going on around you at the time? Think about that as you look over your list. And I'm hoping that at least one thing will jump out at you, and it'll be something that you want to write about. I did this in one class here at Spring Hill Library, by the way, and the next class, in the second class, one of the participants came back with 5 stories. His wife called him an overachiever, but he had 5 stories that he wrote that were or 5 essays that he wrote, page-and-a-half essays, that revealed a lot about who he was and some, especially growing up. And I think that that's so important and valuable to your family and to your friends and to those who, come behind you. I mean, I think we need to leave a legacy. Although some people write memoirs not just to leave a legacy, they may have gone through something traumatic and got to the other end of it and want to share that experience as well. There are lots of things to write about. Family, personal, and so I can't imagine writing fiction because memoirs to me have so much more, are so much more interesting. So step 1 is you identify, a list. You make a list. Step 2, you identify what incident or what event that you're going to write about. And remember, it doesn't have to be a book. It only has to be a page, page and a half. Doesn't even have to be that long. It can be a half page. It can be poetry. There are lots of different ways that you can express yourself in this while writing a memoir. But once you've identified an event that you think you might like, this is where you get out the Post-it notes. And I think the Post-it notes are really pretty handy. What you need to do is think about that moment and that time, and then list on Post-it notes just little words that'll help you remember what happened, what you think about, what you remember when you think about that day. What is it that you recall, whether at the setting, everything that you can remember about that event. There will be other things that you'll think about as you write it that are really related to that event. But by doing this helps you stay focused on the incident that you're writing about or the memoir that you're writing, because this is right at the spot where a lot of people run into trouble. And that is that they decide they're going to write about a particular incident that happened to them, and as they're letting it flow and writing, one memory recalls another memory that may or may not be related. And that memory recalls another memory. And before long, and way too quickly, you're going down a rabbit hole trying to remember what your purpose was when you first started writing a memoir, because now you're kind of lost in the weeds. So if you think ahead and plan what it is, what events you want to make sure you include in it, that will help you stay focused. Those are just 3 suggestions. You have to take the class to get the other details about and tips about how to write, where to start, and how to finish. I've actually had students that are published. One was during the class. By the 5th week, she'd gotten a notification that her first essay had been accepted by publication. Most people, including myself, I just write it for my family, or I write it to share with friends, or I write it personally. Can't tell you how many letters my husband got when I was mad. Some of my best writing, actually, but I did not keep all of those. He's a good man, and we're still together, actually. So